All right, welcome back to the deep dive. If you're here, you're probably the kind of person who likes to get to the bottom of things, really understand how stuff works, but, without getting bogged down in all the details. Today, we're going to do just that with how we learn best.
Exactly. Yeah. We've been digging into a whole bunch of research papers, and well, they all kind of focus on this really crucial aspect of how we learn effectively.
Okay.
It's all about how you manage your own learning. What researchers call self-regulation,
Uh-huh.
and how that interacts with, well, how much mental effort, how much brain power it takes to learn something.
Right.
They call that cognitive load.
Cognitive load. Yeah, I've heard that term before.
Yeah.
So it's like, imagine you're trying to learn something new, like, I don't know, how to code or something. Self-regulation would be like figuring out what you need to learn, like what are the steps, and then how you're going to actually learn it, like what are the best strategies for you.
Right.
And then checking in on yourself, like, am I actually getting this? Am I making progress? And then cognitive load is like all the mental heavy lifting that goes into it.
Right, all the brain power it demands, like grasping those new concepts, figuring out how to debug your code, remembering all the syntax, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just about like knowing the stuff, it's about like managing the whole process of learning.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what we're going to do today, I guess, is figure out how those two things work together.
Yeah, and more importantly, how you can actually make that interaction work for you. Use it to your advantage.
Yeah, especially these days, right? I mean, it seems like everyone's having to become more and more of an independent learner.
For sure. It's interesting. For a long time, people who study self-regulated learning, so, SRL and cognitive load theory, CLT, they treated them almost like they were totally separate things. Yeah. But there's been this growing realization that they're actually super connected, like they're really intertwined. There was this special issue put together by De Bruin and Van Marienboer back in 2017 that really pushed for bridging these two areas.
So for a while, we were looking at how people learn and how much effort it takes, mentally as two separate things. But now there's this shift towards looking at how they actually affect each other.
Exactly, yeah. And even Bokert's, she pointed out that, in that same issue, that truly intertwining these fields is still a work in progress. But the shift to more self-directed learning, like especially during the pandemic, the corona crisis, it really highlighted why this connection is so important. I mean, suddenly learners weren't just dealing with the actual stuff they had to learn, the content, but they also had to figure out how to manage their own learning, like what to study, how to study, when to study. They basically had to become their own learning managers.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a whole other layer on top of just trying to grasp, the actual material.
Yes, exactly.
It's like I got to figure out my schedule. I got to stay focused when there are distractions. I got to, be honest with myself about whether I'm actually getting it.
Yeah, and that's where this framework comes in. It's called the Effort Monitoring and Regulation Framework,
Okay.
EMR framework.
Mm-hmm.
It tries to directly connect SRL with mental effort,
Mm.
which, as you know, is a key concept in CLT, cognitive load theory.
Mm-hmm.
And the big idea here, the central argument, is that the relationship between these two, it's not just one way.
Mm-hmm.
It's mutual. Self-regulation and cognitive load, they affect each other.
Okay, so how does like the mental effort of learning actually lead to self-regulation?
Well, think about it. You're learning something new, and you start to feel your brain working hard, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You naturally start to pay attention to that feeling, that effort. It becomes like a signal that tells you something about how you're doing.
Like if it feels really hard, I'm probably going to think, "Oh, I must not be getting this."
Exactly. There's there was this big study, a meta-analysis actually by Bars and some colleagues, and they found that when people said they were putting in a lot of effort, they also tended to have, a less positive view of how well they were doing. It's like, this is so hard, I must be failing.
Oh, right, right. But hold on. I thought like effort was a good thing, right? Like doesn't putting in effort mean you're more likely to learn?
Yeah, that's true. And De Bruin and others, they talk about this idea of effort as important, where the act of putting in effort is seen as valuable for really understanding something, deeply.
Okay, so there's like a difference between like struggling productively and just feeling totally lost.
Exactly. It's
Uh,
like if you're struggling but you feel like you're making progress, you're kind of chipping away at it,
yeah.
then that effort feels worthwhile. But if you're just stuck, totally stuck and frustrated, then yeah, the effort might feel pointless.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what's really cool is that you can actually train people to use that feeling of effort more effectively. Yeah, there was this study by Van Gogh and some colleagues, and they found that when they taught learners to use this kind of system, right, where they combined how well they were doing on a task with how much effort they felt they were putting in, and then use that to decide what to do next, those learners actually got better at judging their own learning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were better at choosing the right tasks for them, and they actually learned more overall. It shows you that, being aware of your effort, like really paying attention to it, can actually help you make smarter learning choices.
So like instead of just being like, "Ah, this is hard," I can actually use that feeling of effort to guide my learning.
Precisely.
That's really interesting. So we've talked about how cognitive load can lead to self-regulation, but now let's flip it. How does self-regulation, the act of trying to manage my own learning, how does that actually add to the cognitive load?
Ah, that's a great question. And it's a crucial point. You see, all those things you do to manage your learning, planning your study time, monitoring your understanding, deciding what to review, they all take mental energy. They're not free, you know.
Okay.
It's like anything else, it requires resources. Think about think about learning journals, for example.
Oh, okay.
Knuckles and colleagues, they did some work on this. Writing in a journal about what you're learning, it can be really helpful. It
Yeah.
helps you reflect and it can really improve your understanding.
Yeah.
But it also takes mental energy, right? You got
Bigger.
to think about what to write, you got to organize your thoughts, and you even need some motivation to actually
Yeah.
do it. If you don't have some kind of prompt or support, you might not put in the effort, the mental effort that it takes to really benefit.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I know keeping a learning journal is supposed to be good for you, but sometimes it just feels like one more thing on my to-do list.
Exactly. And it's not just journals,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. There's this concept that Idle and colleagues talk about. They call it self-management. And it's this idea that if the way something is taught isn't great, if the information's all over the place or there's a bunch of irrelevant stuff, learners will try to compensate by being more self-regulating.
Okay.
So they might, really focus on what seems important or try to organize the information themselves. And while this can help them learn, even when the instruction isn't great, it also takes a lot of mental energy. It's like you're using up your willpower, your mental drive to make up for the fact that the teaching isn't doing its job. And, that drive, it can get depleted over time. And when that happens, it can even change how you perceive your own effort.
Oh, so it's like I'm trying to work around bad teaching by being extra careful myself, but then I just end up mentally exhausted.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's kind of a bummer. But is there any way around this? Like, is it always going to be this trade-off between, trying to manage my learning and just getting mentally drained?
Well, there might be. You see, Worth and colleagues, they offer a different perspective. They suggest that if you have a lot of prior knowledge, and you've practiced learning strategies a lot, those self-regulatory actions can actually become almost automatic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they can happen without you even consciously thinking about them. And when strategies become second nature, they require less mental effort.
So it's like it doesn't feel so hard anymore.
Exactly. It's like a, skilled chess player, right?
Mm.
They're constantly evaluating the board, planning their moves, but it doesn't feel like the same mental strain as it does for a beginner. Or think about, a musician, a seasoned musician playing a piece they've played 1,000 times.
Yeah.
They're still regulating their performance, making sure everything's in sync, but it's much more effortless than when they were first learning the notes.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So it's like if you do something enough, it becomes second nature and it doesn't take as much mental effort. Okay, so we've talked about this back and forth between self-regulation and cognitive load, but I'm curious, like, what are researchers actually doing with this knowledge? Like, how are they trying to actually improve learning by considering both of these things?
Well, the research in this special issue we've been talking about, it points to three main approaches.
Okay.
One is making the learning material itself more effective.
Okay.
Another is helping learners use their feeling of effort as a better guide.
Okay.
And the third one is directly teaching learners how to manage their own learning more effectively.
Okay, so it's three different ways to kind of tackle this problem. So let's take those one at a time. What does it mean to like make the learning material itself more effective? Like, how do you actually do that?
Well, this approach focuses on using activities that force you to really engage with the information to actively process it. So things like drawing your own diagrams to explain a concept, or
Mm-hmm.
summarizing what you've learned in your own words, or even just trying to recall information from memory. They call these um, generative activities.
Generative
Yeah, and
activities.
the idea is that, not only do these activities help you learn the material more deeply, but they also give you like clearer feedback on what you actually understand.
So by doing something with the information, I'm not just passively absorbing it. I'm actually like testing myself and seeing what sticks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can really help you improve your ability to judge your own learning.
Okay, so that makes sense, but does it actually work?
Well, there's some interesting research on that. Prince and colleagues, they did this meta-analysis, where they looked at a bunch of studies on generative activities.
Okay.
And they found that, yeah, these kinds of tasks do tend to make learners more accurate in judging their own understanding.
Okay, that's good.
But uh, the impact on actual learning itself, like how much they actually learned, it was less clear.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's not just Prince's study. Van de Poel and colleagues, they found something similar.
Okay.
They were looking at how using visual aids could help learners judge their understanding of relationships between different pieces of information.
Uh-huh.
And they found that, yeah, the visual aids did help with that judgment, but it didn't always lead to better learning or even smarter decisions about what to study again.
So it's like I might have a better sense of what I don't know, but that doesn't automatically translate into me actually learning it better.
Right. And the review by Carpenter and colleagues on retrieval practice, where you try to recall information from memory, they found a similar pattern.
Interesting.
Yeah, learners often used retrieval practice to check what they knew, but not necessarily as a way to actually learn more
Hmm.
or to guide their future study.
So the challenge is that, just because I realize I don't understand something, that doesn't mean I know how to fix it.
Exactly. And also doesn't mean I'm actually motivated to put in the extra work to fix it.
Right, right. It's like I might know I have a gap in my knowledge, but I'm not necessarily going to go out of my way to fill it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Learners might not have the skills to turn that awareness into action, or they might just feel overwhelmed by the extra effort it would take.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Okay, so what about the second approach, the one about using your feeling of effort as a guide?
Ah, yes. So this approach is all about making learners more aware of their own mental effort, really tuning into that feeling of how hard their brain is working,
Uh-huh.
and then using that awareness to make decisions about their learning.
Okay.
Like, remember that study by Van Gogh and colleagues we talked about earlier?
Yeah, yeah, the one where they combined performance and effort to decide what task to do next.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of this approach. By training learners to use that system, they were basically linking that feeling of effort to their learning choices.
So it's like instead of just feeling like, "Ooh, this is hard," I can actually use that feeling to guide my next steps.
Precisely. And another interesting finding from this line of research is that the way you ask about effort can actually influence how learners perceive it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you ask about the effort required by a task, that tends to make learners see effort as a negative thing.
Like a sign of difficulty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you ask about the effort they invested in a task, that often leads to a more positive view.
Like it shows that they care about it and they're really trying.
Exactly.
Oh.
And researchers suggest that maybe asking both types of questions could be a good way to encourage learners to really think about their effort.
Okay, so the wording of the question actually matters.
It does, yeah. It can actually shift how someone interprets their own struggle.
That's really interesting. All right, so let's move on to the third approach, the one about directly teaching learners how to manage their own learning. What does that look like?
So this approach is all about, really explicitly teaching learners how to think about their own learning and how to take control of it.
Okay.
Things like, learning journals, which Knuckles and colleagues studied, are a classic
Well,
example.
right, right. We talked about those earlier.
Yeah, by writing about what they're learning, the strategies they're using, the challenges they're facing, learners can really gain some valuable insights into their own learning process.
Yeah.
And this can potentially increase what we call germane load, which is the mental effort that's directed at actually understanding the material.
Okay.
Think of it as the mental work you do to connect new information with what you already know.
Okay, so keeping a journal can help me see the bigger picture of my learning and maybe identify some patterns, but it does require me to put in the effort to reflect the thoughtfully.
Exactly. It's not just about writing stuff down. It's about
Right.
really thinking about it.
Right.
And there's been some interesting research on different kinds of prompts and support you can give learners to help them get the most out of journal writing.
Hmm.
Another interesting angle here is what Idle and colleagues call the suboptimal instruction approach.
Okay, that sounds kind of negative.
Well, it's not necessarily negative. What they found is that even just subtly hinting to learners that the learning material might have some flaws, might not be perfect, can actually encourage them to be more self-regulating.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like they might be more selective about what they pay attention to, or they might, put in more effort to organize the information themselves.
So it's like if I know the teaching isn't perfect, I'm going to have to work harder to learn.
Exactly. But as we talked about earlier, this can come at a cost. It can
Hmm.
use up their mental energy over time.
Right, right. We talked about that. Okay, so it seems like across all these different approaches, the learner's own resources, like what they already know, their skills, their motivation, all that stuff, it plays a huge role in how well they can balance self-regulation and cognitive load.
Absolutely. I mean, this interplay between self-regulation and cognitive load, it doesn't happen in a vacuum,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's heavily influenced by what the learner brings to the table.
Okay.
And there's this model, the INVO model by Hasselhorn and Gold, that gives us a really helpful way to think about this.
Okay.
It outlines two main types of resources that are important for learning.
Okay.
One is cognitive resources, so things like attention, working memory, learning strategies, and prior knowledge.
Okay, so the mental tools I have.
Exactly. And the other type is motivational and effective resources. So things like your motivation, how you view yourself as a learner, your willpower, your emotions.
Okay, so it's not just about how smart I am, it's also about how I feel about learning and how much I care about it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Seufert's model, which looks at self-regulation as a function of your resources and the demands of the task, it illustrates this really well.
Okay.
Basically, it suggests that there's a sweet spot when it comes to task difficulty.
Oh.
So if a task is too easy, you don't really need to engage in a lot of self-regulation because you have plenty of resources to handle it.
Right.
But if a task is super difficult, like way beyond your current abilities, then you might not even be able to regulate effectively no matter how hard you try.
Okay.
It's kind of like Goldilocks, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Too easy, too hard, there's a just right.
So where's the sweet spot?
The sweet spot is when the task is challenging enough to make you think, to
Right.
make you engage in self-regulation, but not so challenging that it completely overwhelms your resources.
Okay, so it's like I need to be challenged but not too challenged.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And this really highlights the need for more research to figure out which of these resources are the most important and how they affect this relationship between self-regulation and cognitive load.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I'm curious, we've been talking about self-regulation, and it seems like a lot of the research we've discussed really focuses on how well learners can judge their own learning,
Right.
like how accurately they can assess their own understanding. Is that really the main focus of self-regulation in this context?
Well, it's certainly a key aspect. Being able to accurately monitor your own understanding, to know what you know and what you don't know,
Yeah.
it's crucial for effective learning.
Yeah.
And a lot of the studies we've talked about, like the ones by Bars, Carpenter, Brens, and Vanderpool, they all emphasize this monitoring aspect.
Yeah.
But self-regulation it's more than just monitoring. It's also about planning your learning,
Yeah.
setting goals, choosing strategies. And then it's about actually regulating your behavior, putting those strategies into action, staying focused, adapting when things aren't working. So it's really a cyclical process.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing if I'm struggling, it's about having a plan for what to do when I am struggling.
Exactly. And future research could definitely benefit from looking at the full cycle of self-regulation,
Hmm.
not just the monitoring part.
Uh-huh.
And it could also look at, how learners choose and use different learning strategies and how things like their self-efficacy, their belief in their ability to learn and their self-concept, their overall view of themselves as learners, how those things play into it.
So it's not just about being aware of my learning, it's also about having the tools and the confidence to do something about it.
Precisely. And having good metacognitive knowledge is really important too.
Okay, now explain that one to me. Metacognitive knowledge.
So metacognitive knowledge is basically knowledge about knowledge.
Okay.
It's knowing about different learning tasks,
Mhm.
what kinds of tasks there are, what strategies work best for them. It's also about understanding your own strengths and weaknesses as a learner.
Okay, so it's like knowing what I'm good at and what I'm not so good at when it comes to learning.
Exactly. And feedback can be a really valuable way to build this kind of knowledge.
Oh, okay.
Not just feedback on your answers, but feedback on the strategies you used. That can really help you figure out what works best for you in different situations.
So it's not just about like getting a grade, it's about understanding why I got that grade and what I could do differently next time.
Exactly. And we shouldn't forget about that idea from Worth and colleagues about self-regulation becoming automatic.
Right, right. The autopilot idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They suggest that, with enough practice and with deep understanding, those self-regulatory strategies can become so ingrained that they happen without you even really thinking about them. It's like you just instinctively know the best way to approach a problem because you've done it so many times before.
Yeah, that's a really cool concept. Okay, so we've talked a lot about self-regulation, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about the other side of the equation. Cognitive load. How is cognitive load actually being defined and measured in this research?
So Scheider and colleagues, they make this really important distinction between mental load, which is the mental resources that a task requires, and mental effort, which is the resources that you actually invest in the task.
Okay, so one is like the demand and the other's like the actual energy I'm putting in.
Exactly. And the EMR framework, which a lot of this research is based on, it focuses mainly on mental effort.
Okay.
Now, you might remember that classic cognitive load theory talks about different types of load.
Right, intrinsic, extraneous, and germane.
Exactly. But a lot of the studies that measure effort, they don't really differentiate between these types. They just use like a single general measure of how much effort someone feels they're putting in.
So it's like we're getting a sense of how hard something feels, but we're not really sure why it feels hard.
Right. Whether it's because the topic itself is complex or the way it's being taught is confusing or maybe the person is just not putting in much effort.
Okay, so how do we tease that apart?
Well, there's another way to think about effort appraisal,
Okay.
and that's to distinguish between data-driven and goal-driven appraisals.
Okay, I'm listening.
So data-driven appraisals, those are about how difficult the task seems. It's like, this feels hard, I must be putting in a lot of effort.
Right.
But goal-driven appraisals, those are about the effort you're consciously choosing to put in, the effort you're investing to reach your learning goals.
Okay, so if I'm focusing on how much effort the task demands of me, that's different from focusing on how much effort I'm choosing to put in to actually master it.
Exactly. And researchers argue that being more specific about how we measure effort in future studies could be really valuable.
Uh-huh.
It could help us understand,
Yeah.
where that effort is coming from and how it influences self-regulation. But, measuring effort is tricky. It's subjective.
Right.
It's not like performance, where we have things like test scores. It's hard to objectively measure how much mental effort someone is putting in.
So we're relying on people to accurately report their own feelings of effort.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's not always reliable,
Yeah.
right? People might not be very good at judging their own effort, or they might be influenced by other factors, like how motivated they are or how they think they should be feeling.
Okay, so it sounds like there's still a lot to learn about how to measure cognitive load effectively.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe the field of cognitive load research could learn some things from the way that self-regulation is studied.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Panadero and others, they've suggested using a wider variety of methods to assess cognitive load, not just relying on self-report.
Right, right. Like maybe using physiological measures or looking at how people's behavior changes when they're under cognitive load.
Exactly. And importantly, we need to pay more attention to the role of motivation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're not motivated, you're just not going to put in the effort, no matter how demanding the task is or how good you are at regulating your learning.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, taking measures of someone's motivational state alongside their effort ratings, that could give us a much more complete picture.
All right, so this has been a really fascinating deep dive into this complex relationship between self-regulation and cognitive load. Can you kind of summarize the key takeaways for our listeners?
Sure. I think the main thing to remember is that self-regulation and cognitive load are constantly interacting.
Okay.
The mental effort of learning can push you to manage your learning,
Yeah.
to engage in self-regulation. And in the very act of managing your learning, that also takes mental effort, which can add to the cognitive load.
Right, right. It's this back and forth, this dynamic interplay.
Exactly. And we've seen that there are, different approaches to improving learning, by considering both of these elements,
Uh-huh.
from really engaging deeply with the material itself to being more mindful of your own effort to actively managing your learning process.
Okay.
And at the heart of it all are your own individual resources, your knowledge, your skills, and your motivation. Those things make a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So here's something for our listeners to really ponder. We've talked about how we perceive effort can really matter,
Right.
whether we see it as a sign of difficulty or a sign of importance.
Uh-huh.
So what if you tried intentionally framing challenging tasks in a more positive light?
Okay.
Really focusing on their value and why they matter to you. Could that actually change how you approach them and how much you learn from them?
That's a really great question.
Yeah, it's like instead of thinking, ugh, this is so hard, what if you thought, this is important and my effort here is going to pay off?
Yeah, maybe just that shift in perspective could make a big difference.
It could. It really could. And remember, everyone, this is just a starting point. We've just scratched the surface here. If anything we've talked about today has piqued your interest, any of the strategies, the models, the research, we encourage you to go explore it further, dig a little deeper and see how you can apply these insights to your own learning journey.
Absolutely. And, who knows, maybe you'll discover something new about yourself and how you learn best.
Thanks for joining us today on the Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See you then.